hi everyone. Like I said, my name is Mickela P, and I'm going to talk to you about designing engaging experiences for children. So first of all, I just want to get a feel for how many of you actually work with children or design for children. So can I have a show of hands? Okay, there's quite a few. Okay. I'll try and make this talk relevant just in general for UX, but the focus will be on children. But before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about me. So I work for a consultancy in London called System Concepts. So we specialize in UX research, strategy, and design. So we've been around for over 30 years now, so we're one of the older consultancies, and we're also one of the smaller consultancies. So at the moment, we've got around 14 consultants, and we've all got a slightly different talent that we like to kind of bring to the team. We work across a wide range of clients, so one week we might be working with investment bankers, and the next week we might be working with CBBC to do some research for children. So I particularly like that side of our job, the variety it brings, as well as being able to work with children. And as I'm sure you can tell from my accent and the speed at which I'm going, I'm not from here. So if any of you recognize the flag down there, does anyone recognize the flag down there? Sri Lanka, very good. So that's where I'm from. So I grew up there, and I came to England to kind of study, as my parents like to call it. So I came here to go to university. So I did a bachelor's degree in computer science, I think. And then I went on to do a master's degree in human-computer interaction, which is where I discovered this wonderful subject of user experience. I've been at System Concepts for around just over 8 years now. And I'm a principal consultant there. Anyway, enough about me. So let's kind of start talking about children. So designing for children has a whole different level of complexity because the group that we think of as children can span from 0 months, but usually in UX we try and think of kids who can use the device independently. So it might be 1.5, sometimes younger, all the way up until 15, 16. So if you think about that group, the actual variety that they bring to the board is very different. So you might have a 2-year-old who hasn't fully developed yet physically or cognitively, so their dexterity might not be perfect. And then you have a 15-year-old who's, in their minds, they are adults. So when you're designing for children, you really need to understand that you're not really designing for children as a group, but you're designing for little segments within that population. And within that group, there's also the kids with disabilities. And we have to be honest with ourselves. Whether someone has a disability or not, they still have the same goals and wants as the rest of us. So it's really important that we realize that disabled children are still within our target user group, and that we really need to consider their needs within anything that we design. So if you think about all those varieties and the excitement and the differences that the children bring into the group, it's really important we realize that children are not mini adults. So the way we use technology is different. So with adults, there's usually, most of the time, some kind of reason that we're using technology. So it might be that we're playing a game because we want to waste time or make time go by faster. Or it might be that we're looking for our next holiday to Sri Lanka and we want to try and find a nice hotel to stay in. So it's generally very goal related. Whereas with children, the reason that they engage with technology is often unpredictable. They'll love something 1 minute, hate something the next. So it's really important to try and recognize the difference. Another point just to note is that how we use technology as a whole has changed. So I remember the first time we got a computer, and I used to sit with my dad on his lap, and he used to tell me, okay, you can press that button now, and you can do this now, you can do that now. But nowadays, you'll have kids, like you were saying, they'll be Skyping people by themselves, they'll be picking up iPads, toddlers will buy things themselves by mistake most of the time. So it's really important to realize that expectations of how children use technology has also changed quite a lot. So Ofcom did some research recently to try and find out how many children actually have tablets and tablet use. And what they found was that, and I was really surprised by this, I'm not sure why, but they found that 1 in 3 children in the UK own their own tablet. So this is not a shared device, but this is their own personal device. So I think that is really quite telling of the times. And I was really shocked by that. And if you think about it, they did further research and they found out that something like 71% of children live in households with tablets, which, that I was not so surprised by. But the fact that kids have their own personal device, I think, is something we need to really realize and think through. It often makes me wonder what these children are going to grow up to be like, because I've got little nephews and they'll often pick up something that clearly doesn't have a touch screen and they'll try to flick it. And I often wonder, life is going to be so hard for you. So basically, I think devices are used almost like a nanny nowadays. So there's lots of debate going on at the moment about how much children should be allowed to play and use devices, and if the time that they use devices for should be limited. So that's a whole different conversational topic, which I'm not going to get into now. But I think the point there is, because we know that children often learn by playing, as designers and people in this field, we have quite a big responsibility to try and come up with products that have an element of learning in it. So it's really important that we design experiences that are engaging and actually useful to children. So what can we do to make sure that what we design make sure that the products we design are actually engaging and helpful? So there are lots of things we can do. So we can make educated guesses. So we've all got access to the children in our lives, so we know certain things about them. So for example, we know there's quite a lot of research out there that tells us how their mind works. We know that maybe their dexterity isn't as perfect as an adult, so we know that they might need bigger touch targets, those kinds of things. We know that they like stories, they like positive feedback, they like anything funny that happens. So if you have a character that kind of pops up and does something funny, they'll want that as a reward. So we can make an educated guess, but the difficulty really comes from how different and how quickly children change. So just like adults, children have a little bit of a herding instinct in them as well. So you'll find that if someone they perceive to be cool likes something, chances are they'll want to have a go as well. And it's really hard to keep track of what is cool in a child's world. So the answer really is to get regular user feedback and to really try and understand the point at which these kids are at. So that's what I thought I could spend the rest of this talk chatting to you about. So there are a couple of top tips we can pass on to you guys that we can discuss that we could consider when designing for children. And the first thing really is to set really, really clear research objectives, and then choose a method that helps you meet those research objectives. So for example, if you wanted to try and find out how children turn take, so you want inspiration for a new multiplayer game that you're working on, and you want to find out how children turn take, how they share devices, how that side of things work. An approach involving more ethnographic methods, where you might do some in-context research, where you go and observe children actually playing together, turn-taking, sharing, would be more beneficial than actually getting them into a lab or asking parents how their children behave. So getting reliable data through real observation really helps. Another instance could be that you've already done your background research and you've come up with a game that you think is quite good, and you've included some perhaps interactive tutorials that explain some of the more complex parts of the game, and you might want to try and see if children understand this. In those situations, lab-based user testing will be more cost-effective. So it's really important you identify your research objectives and then match it up with a really good method that meets your research objectives. So the next thing with kids is to be prepared. And I found this out like the hard way often with kids research because they are so unpredictable. I've had children braiding my hair. I've had children asking me in mid-sentence, asking me where I'm from, where my parents live, all sorts. So just be prepared for a little bit of a tangent. So plan in some time just to get them comfortable and ready. Another really important thing with kids research is recruiting the right kids. So children are very opinionated, and unlike adults, they won't be polite. So if you know that you're testing a game that it has a character from a TV show, make sure that you get children who actually like that TV show, because otherwise you get children sitting there going, oh, I would never play this because I don't like him. And that's a whole other wasted. So it's really important you think through your recruitment criteria and you think through who to actually get for your sessions. And of course, it's really important that you include children with disabilities within this group, because like I said before, just because someone has a disability, it does not mean that they wouldn't be interested or be engaged in whatever product you're developing. They're gonna wanna be just the same as their friends. So once you've sorted out your recruitment, the next thing to do is try and plan out how you're going to run the session. So like we talked about before, it's really important that you have clear research objectives and you've got a script in mind that helps you address these objectives. Often with a script, it should be quite flexible, and I'll talk about that in a second, but you need to really be clear on how long you're going to take and so on. And generally with kids sessions, we try and limit it to around 30 minutes, and if you absolutely had to go up to 45, 60 minutes. But 30 minutes is generally the realistic kind of amount of time that you can maintain their interest for. Another thing, and that is why the teddy bear's up there, another thing to think about is where you actually do the sessions. So most of the time, it's great if you can do sessions at the participants' homes or at a friend's house or at their schools, so it's somewhere comfortable for them. But for budget reasons, often that's difficult. So if you do have to do research in a lab or an office environment, then it works really well to kind of think through and make sure that the environment is comfortable. So at System Concepts, we've got one lab that's set up more like a homely type environment. And often, if there's kids research happening, we'll bring in some toys, some storybooks, and so on, and leave it around so that it feels a little bit more comfortable for them. Okay, so another thing to think about is setting the scene. So often with children, you will get the children who are really happy to talk to adults they don't know, and they're really happy to ask questions and they're fully engaged. But you also get the kids who need a little bit more probing and a little bit more kind of help to feel comfortable. So with that group, it's really important that you spend a little bit of time setting the scene for them. So just like with any other sessions in user research, it's important that you make sure that the children understand that they are the experts and they are helping you understand problems with whatever it is you're testing. Because often they can go into this situation where they think it's a test and then they'll get stressed and then it doesn't feel like a realistic setting for getting feedback from them. So it's really important that you set the scene. And it's also really important that you reinforce your neutrality. So when you kind of facilitate and they say they hate something, you have to smile along, go along with it, which is just basic good facilitation skills when you're running UX research. But with children, it's just making sure that you follow that a little bit more. And it's also really important that you engage with them. So if they want to talk about something completely off topic, let them do that, especially at the start, just to get them comfortable and letting them kind of voice out their opinion. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is the importance of being really, really flexible. So whenever you run sessions with children, and I think I've said this throughout, you'll realize that each child is very different. So especially with the younger age group, you'll find that they often find it difficult to verbalize what they actually think. And if you give them things like rating scales, they'll generally give you the highest rating possible because they are often uncomfortable with admitting that something was difficult because they see that as a reflection upon their capability, and everyone wants to be Superman at that age. So it's really important that you observe how they get along with using the technology. So it might be things like seeing if they can actually navigate, if they can get to the page they want to get to, asking them how they would describe this to a friend, asking them if they would use it when they go home, and then if possible following up with the parent later on to see if they actually did use it. So it's things like that that are actually quite helpful to do with children. It's also really important that you have a few tricks up your sleeve when running sessions with children. So for example, you're bound to get kids who just don't want to give you feedback. But if you give them some gold stars and a few sad faces, and you give them a printout of whatever, and you tell them to put gold stars next to things they liked and sad faces next to what they didn't, every child loves stickers, I have found. So you will get a page full of stickers. But it's really important that as you facilitate, you make sure that it's not them just randomly sticking stickers on, that they are actually thinking through what they did, and that comes from good facilitation. We also do things like wishing wells. So we might make something that looks like a wishing well and give them a piece of paper and pen and tell them, okay, if you can, put stuff in this wishing well, your top 3 wishes for this product, what would you put in there? And immediately you'll see kids who had absolutely no ideas before coming up with the most brilliant ideas, just because they want to put something in this wishing well. So it's kind of a little bit of tricking that often gets them to tell you what they think. Another kind of thing that we tend to do with our sessions is making sure that children understand that when we report back to our client that we anonymize the data, because often, I suppose it's just human nature, they don't want to be seen as giving negative feedback. So it's really important that you make that really clear to them as well. So obviously, as designers, it's sometimes difficult to tap into and understand children, but by thinking through your research questions, thinking through the method you're going to use, thinking through the actual users you're going to recruit, and then using some really good facilitation skills, you will be able to tap into the limitless kind of creativity that children have, and their just natural curiosity, which will give you lots of really genuine good ideas of things to develop as well as things to improve on any digital products that you use. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover for today. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, because I think I have a couple of more minutes if anyone has any questions, or you can grab me later. Yeah, cool. Thank you very much.